Every night at exactly 7:12 p.m., the elevator doors on the 42nd floor slid open with the same tired sigh. And every night, Evelyn Carter stepped out quietly, pushing a grey cleaning cart whose wheels squeaked no matter how often she oiled them. The office was always the same at that hour, too quiet, too bright, smelling faintly of citrus cleaner and cold ambition. Glass walls reflected her image back at her, a black woman in her late 50s, hair pulled back neatly, shoulders slightly stooped not from age but from years of learning how to take up as little space as possible. She had worked in this building for 11 years. 11 years of late nights and early mornings. 11 years of wiping fingerprints off conference tables where million-dollar decisions were made by people who never learned her name. To them, she was invisible background noise, like the hum of the air conditioning or the soft click of heels leaving the office at sunset. Evelyn knew the building better than anyone. She knew which executives left coffee rings on their desks and which ones stacked papers obsessively straight. She knew which offices were empty after layoffs and which lights were never turned off because someone was always working late, chasing a promotion that might never come. She knew which corners of the carpet were frayed and which chairs creaked when someone leaned back too hard. What she also knew, what she had learned early on, was not to speak unless spoken to. On her first week, more than a decade ago, she had smiled too much. Said "Good evening," a little too warmly. A young manager had glanced at her, startled, then nodded stiffly without slowing his pace. Another time she had politely pointed out a spilled drink near a glass wall, worried someone might slip. The response had been a frown and a clipped, "Just handle it." After that, Evelyn learned the rules of silence. She moved methodically now, replacing trash bags, straightening chairs, erasing whiteboards covered in half-finished strategies and acronyms she understood better than anyone realized. She paused briefly at the largest conference room, staring at the long polished table that could seat 20 people. She had cleaned that table the morning after mergers, after firings, after celebrations marked by empty champagne bottles and careless laughter. She had once overheard a senior executive joking, "This place practically runs itself." Evelyn had wiped the table as she listened, her reflection distorted in the glossy surface. She remembered thinking how funny it was that the people who said that never noticed who came in after them to make sure the place looked perfect again. Tonight felt different, though she couldn't have said why. The building had been buzzing all day about the new CEO. A sudden change. The old leadership pushed out quietly, the way things always were at the top. Evelyn had heard the whispers while emptying bins on lower floors, people talking in excited, nervous tones about new vision, new culture, and fresh eyes. Fresh eyes, she thought as she sprayed cleaner onto a desk. She doubted those eyes would see her. As she pushed her cart toward the executive floor, she noticed lights still on in the corner office, the biggest one, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. That office had been empty for weeks. Tonight, someone was inside. Evelyn hesitated. Executives sometimes stayed late on their first day, full of energy and purpose. She usually skipped occupied offices and returned later. It was easier that way. Less awkward, less risk of being noticed. But her checklist mattered. She had learned that too. Do the job thoroughly, even when no one thanks you for it. She knocked softly on the open door. No response. She knocked again, a little louder. "Housekeeping," she said, her voice calm and professional. Still nothing. She stepped inside carefully. The office was immaculate already, but she began her routine anyway, emptying the trash, wiping the desk, aligning the pens. As she moved, she noticed small details. A framed photo of a young boy with a missing front tooth, a handwritten note taped to the monitor, a coffee mug that read, "Integrity isn't optional." She was wiping the glass table when she heard footsteps behind her. "Excuse me." Evelyn turned quickly, heart jumping. She instinctively lowered her eyes. "Sorry, sir. I didn't realize." "That's okay." the man said gently, not irritated, curious. She glanced up despite herself. He wasn't what she expected. No sharp suit jacket tossed over a chair, no distracted look of someone checking emails while pretending to listen. He stood with his hands relaxed at his sides, watching her, not through her, not past her, but directly at her. Then he smiled. "Good evening, Ms. Carter." For a moment, Evelyn thought she had misheard. Her fingers tightened around the cloth. "I'm sorry." He tilted his head slightly, as if confused by her confusion. Evelyn Carter, right? The room seemed to tilt. In 11 years, not a single executive had ever called her by name, not once. "Yes," she said slowly. That's me." He nodded. "I'm Daniel Whitmore. I know we haven't officially met yet." She stared at him, realization crashing over her in a wave that left her breathless. The new CEO. "I just wanted to say," he continued, his voice steady, "thank you. This office looks like someone actually cares about it." Evelyn had cleaned thousands of rooms, but never had the air felt so heavy, so charged. Her mind raced with questions she didn't dare ask. How did he know her name? Why was he looking at her like she mattered? "You're welcome, sir," she said quietly, defaulting to the script she had perfected over years. But Daniel didn't turn back to his desk. He didn't dismiss her. Instead, he smiled again, this time with something deeper behind it. "I hope we'll have a chance to talk more, Evelyn," he said. "I think there's a lot about this company I can learn from you." As she pushed her cart back into the hallway, her hands trembled just slightly. For the first time in 11 years, someone at the top had seen her. And she had no idea that this moment, this single sentence spoken out loud, was about to change everything. Morning light crept into the office through the tall glass windows, turning the city outside into a pale blur of motion. By the time most employees began arriving, Eleanor was already halfway through her routine. She moved quietly, methodically, as she always did, emptying trash bins, straightening chairs, wiping fingerprints from glass tables that no one remembered touching. Her cart rolled softly over the polished floor, its squeak long ago fixed with a piece of tape she had added herself. People passed her without looking. Some walked straight through her line of sight while talking into their phones, their voices sharp and hurried. Others stepped around her mop as if it were an inconvenience rather than a sign of another human being at work. Elena was used to this. After 12 years in the same building, invisibility had become a kind of armor. It hurt less when you stopped expecting acknowledgement. She reached the executive floor just before 9. This level was different. Quieter, cleaner, more controlled. The air smelled faintly of citrus and expensive coffee. Elena always took extra care here. The desks were wider, the glass walls spotless, the floors so reflective she could see her own face looking back at her as she worked. A woman in her mid-40s stared back, tired eyes, carefully tied hair, a uniform worn thin at the elbows. As she wiped down the long conference table, her thoughts drifted, as they often did, to how much she had seen in this room. Heated arguments behind closed doors, laughter after big deals, people fired with a handshake and a smile. She had heard it all, learned to recognize moods from tone alone. No one ever realized how much she knew. A sudden burst of voices from the hallway pulled her back. Several executives were gathered near the glass doors, speaking in low, urgent tones. Eleanor instinctively slowed her movements, not out of curiosity, but habit. When powerful people spoke like that, it was safer to be unnoticed. "The announcement is today," one man said. "I thought it was next week," another replied. "Change of plans. Board decision." Eleanor kept her head down, pretending to focus on a stubborn smudge. The words meant nothing to her. Announcements came and went. But there was tension in the air, the kind that made even confident people uneasy. By late morning, the building buzzed more than usual. Emails flew, assistants hurried back and forth. Eleanor finished her assigned floors earlier than expected and moved to the break area to refill her cleaning supplies. As she passed a group of younger employees, one of them laughed and said, "Careful, you'll end up like her if you don't speak up." Eleanor felt the words hit her back like a tap, light, almost casual, but intentional. She didn't turn around. She never did. Silence, she had learned, was safer than dignity when dignity wasn't recognized. Around noon, her supervisor, Mark, stopped her near the supply closet. He barely glanced at her face. "Big meeting today," he said. "Make sure the main conference room is perfect. CEO-level stuff." Elena nodded. "It already is." Mark raised an eyebrow, surprised she had spoken at all, then shrugged and walked away. She returned to the conference room and did one final check. Chairs aligned, screens clean, water glasses polished until they caught the light. As she stepped back to admire the order she had created, she felt a strange tightness in her chest, an unexplainable sense that something was different today. At exactly 1 o'clock, the executives began to arrive. Eleanor gathered her cart and prepared to leave, but before she could exit, the door opened again. A man entered alone. He was younger than she expected, calm, composed, dressed simply but expensively. He paused just inside the room, scanning it slowly, not like someone inspecting property, but like someone remembering a place. Elena froze, unsure whether to slip out quietly or wait to be dismissed. The man's eyes landed on her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Not the polite, empty smile she saw every day, but something warmer, more deliberate. "Good afternoon," he said. Eleanor hesitated, surprised by the directness. "Good afternoon, sir." He looked around once more, then back at her. "You've kept this room in remarkable condition." "Thank you," she replied, unsure why her voice felt tight. He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "I've noticed." Before she could respond, footsteps filled the hallway again. The rest of the board entered, conversations stopping abruptly when they saw the man already inside. A ripple of confusion moved through them, followed by forced smiles and sudden respect. Eleanor quietly pushed her cart toward the door. Just as she reached it, the man spoke again. "Eleanor." The sound of her name stopped her cold. She turned slowly, her heart pounding. "Yes?" she asked. Several executives stared at her, puzzled. Some frowned, others looked irritated. The man met her eyes steadily. "Thank you for everything you do here. We'll talk soon." Eleanor nodded, unable to form words, and left the room. Her hands trembled as she gripped the cart handle, her mind racing with questions she had learned not to ask. No one had spoken her name in this building in years, and she had the unsettling feeling that, for the first time, someone had truly seen her. The room fell quiet in a way that felt heavier than noise, not awkward, intentional. Every keyboard seemed to pause, every whispered conversation died mid-sentence. Even the hum of the lights overhead felt louder than before. Marianne stood frozen beside the long conference table, her cleaning cart still parked neatly against the wall where she always left it when meetings were in session. She had learned the rhythms of the building over the years, the hours when executives gathered, when assistants rushed in with coffee, when voices grew sharp behind glass walls. She knew when to make herself invisible. But now, invisibility had been taken from her without warning. The new CEO, Daniel Whitmore, remained standing at the head of the table. He hadn't sat down after saying her name. He was looking at her the same way one might look at a photograph rediscovered in an old drawer, carefully, with recognition, and something else underneath it, something close to disbelief. "Marianne Lewis," he repeated, more softly this time, as if testing the sound of it in the air. A senior manager cleared his throat. "Daniel," he said, forcing a light chuckle, "we can continue once housekeeping is finished." Daniel didn't look at him. "No," he replied calmly, "we won't." That single word landed harder than any raised voice could have. Marianne's hands tightened around the handle of her cart. Her instinct was to apologize, to back away, to say she would return later. Years of experience had trained her to disappear at moments like this. She opened her mouth, then stopped, because Daniel was walking toward her. Each step echoed in the room. A few people exchanged glances. One woman frowned, clearly annoyed. Another leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, curiosity flickering across his face. Daniel stopped a few feet from Marianne. Up close, she could see the lines at the corners of his eyes, the controlled intensity in his expression. This wasn't pity, this wasn't performative kindness. It was something else. Personal. "You probably don't recognize me," he said quietly. Marianne studied his face. She hesitated, then shook her head once. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't." He nodded, as if he'd expected that. "That's fair. It was a long time ago." The silence stretched. Someone at the table shifted uncomfortably. Daniel turned back to the room. "Before we continue," he said, voice steady but firm, "there's something I need to say, and something you all need to understand." He gestured gently toward Marianne. "This woman worked in this building when I was an intern. Same floors, same late nights." A few brows lifted. The word intern seemed to surprise them. "I was 22, Daniel continued. "New suit, borrowed confidence, drowning in imposter syndrome. I stayed late almost every night because I was terrified of being the first to leave." His eyes flicked back to Marianne. She was already here. Always. Marianne felt a strange tightening in her chest. Memories surfaced uninvited. Long evenings, empty hallways, the quiet companionship of shared exhaustion. "I didn't belong here back then," Daniel said. "At least, that's what I believed. And most people treated me like I didn't." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Except her." Someone scoffed softly. Daniel's head snapped toward the sound. "She used to talk to me," he went on. "Not small talk. Real conversation. Asked what I was working on. Told me not to quit when I thought about it every single week." The room was utterly still now. "She noticed things no one else did," Daniel said. "When I was passed over, when my ideas were taken and presented by someone else, she told me to write everything down, keep copies, protect myself." Marianne's eyes widened slightly. She remembered those conversations. She remembered the young man who looked exhausted and uncertain, who ate dinner out of vending machines. She hadn't known who he would become, she'd only known he needed encouragement. "She told me," Daniel said, voice tightening just a fraction, "they see your suit before they see your work. Don't let that make you small." A murmur rippled through the room. Daniel turned back to Marianne. "You probably don't remember saying that." She swallowed. "I remember," she said quietly. Something like relief crossed his face. He faced the executives again. "So no," he said. "We're not continuing this meeting until everyone here understands something very clearly." He gestured once more toward Marianne, not dismissive, not dramatic, just precise. "She is not invisible. She never was." No one spoke, and for the first time in years, Marianne didn't step back. She stood exactly where she was, shoulders squared, breathing steady as the weight of the moment settled, not just on her, but on everyone in the room. The boardroom was silent in a way that felt heavier than any raised voice. Not the awkward silence of meetings gone wrong, but the kind that settles when something irreversible has just happened. Every executive at the long glass table stared at the woman standing near the door, still holding her cleaning cart, her hands folded calmly in front of her as if this were the most natural place in the world for her to be. Evelyn Carter. The name still lingered in the air. The new CEO, Daniel Whitmore, broke the silence first. His voice was steady, controlled, but there was something underneath it, emotion carefully restrained. "Before anyone asks why Ms. Carter is here," he said, turning slowly to face the room, "I want to be very clear. She's not here by accident. She's here because she belongs in this conversation." A few executives shifted in their chairs. One man cleared his throat, then thought better of speaking. The same people who had walked past Evelyn for years without a glance were now seeing her as if she had suddenly materialized out of thin air. Daniel walked to the head of the table but didn't sit. For the past 18 years, this company has been losing millions annually due to inefficiencies no one bothered to question. He continued, inflated vendor contracts, redundant departments, a culture that rewards appearance over competence. He paused, then looked directly at Evelyn. Miss Carter noticed. Murmurs rippled across the table. Evelyn felt her heart pound, but she kept her posture straight. She had waited years for someone to listen. Now that it was happening, she refused to shrink. She noticed because she was here earlier than anyone, Daniel went on, and left later than everyone. Because when offices are empty, you learn who actually works and who just talks about work. He nodded to Evelyn. Tell them. All eyes turned to her. For a split second, she remembered every time she'd been ignored, spoken over, or treated as invisible. Then she spoke. I never planned to say anything, she began quietly. I wasn't paid to think. I was paid to clean. She glanced around the room, meeting their eyes one by one. But when you hear the same complaints every night, when you see the same mistakes repeated every quarter, it's hard not to connect the dots. She explained how she'd kept notes, dates, overheard conversations, printed drafts left behind on desks, how she'd noticed which managers stayed late because they had to and which stayed late to be seen, how she'd realized entire departments existed only to protect other departments from accountability. No anger, no accusation, just facts. By the time she finished, the room felt different, smaller, exposed. Daniel placed a slim folder on the table. An independent audit confirmed everything she observed, every single point. One executive finally spoke, his voice tight. And what exactly is it you're suggesting? Daniel didn't hesitate. I'm suggesting we start listening to the people we trained ourselves not to see. He turned to Evelyn again. Ms. Carter has been offered a full-time advisory role in operations analysis, with a salary that reflects the value she's already provided. A few faces drained of colour, others hardened. Evelyn inhaled slowly. I accepted, she said, but only on one condition. Daniel raised an eyebrow, which is, that this doesn't end with me. She gestured toward the windows, toward the floors below. There are people in this building who know more about how it actually works than any of us in this room. Janitors, assistants, night staff, people you never asked. Silence again, but this time it wasn't resistance, it was recognition. Daniel nodded. Then that's where we begin. As the meeting adjourned, executives filed out quietly, avoiding Evelyn's eyes. She remained standing for a moment, absorbing the reality of what had just happened. For years, she had cleaned their messes without complaint. Now, she was finally being heard. And this time, she wasn't invisible anymore.